So on Friday, I interviewed Derek Fildebrandt at the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. He had a great scoop. He had uncovered invoices that showed the city of Calgary had paid $340,000 tax dollars to an anti-oil sands extremist group called the Pembina Institute in Calgary, home of most of the oil companies in Canada. That's crazy. Just look at the Pembina Institute's website. Their mission statement is, quote, leading Canada's transition to a clean energy future. Just in case you're wondering what that means, it means ending the use of fossil fuels, as in oil, especially the oil sands. They hate it. I mean, just last week, these eco-zealots at Pembina sued the government of Alberta with the express purpose of jamming up the oil sands regulatory process. These folks are so extremist, they usually don't even say the word oil sands. They use the pejorative, scientifically inaccurate term tar sands. Here's their former boss, Dan Moynilowicz, writing a Mad Max-style piece of fiction about the horrid tar sands. He called it the harm the tar sands will do. I'm just pointing out that these aren't scientists. They're propagandists. They're as partisan, as biased as they get. So I interviewed Derek Fildebrandt about this on Friday, and I made some comments of my own, mainly about the response to this news by Calgary's mayor, Nenshi. You'd think that the mayor of Calgary, upon learning that tax dollars are being diverted to haters like this, would be outraged. Well, he was. He was outraged at the Taxpayers Federation for shining a light on it. Weird. And I did one more thing on Friday and in my newspaper columns in The Sun this weekend. I rebutted Mayor Nenshi's contention that the money was for scientists, because that's what he had said, remember?
But it is an organization that is full of a lot of experts in addition to doing political advocacy work. You know, unlike the Taxpayers Federation, which is only a lobby organization, this is also a scientific think tank.
Oh yeah, scientific think tank, yeah. Well, as you know, I went through the Pembina invoices to Calgary and I made a list of all 22 Pembina staff who billed Calgary taxpayers. And I found and read each one of their biographies. And they weren't scientific researchers. It was political. A PR contract, pure and simple. In fact, 3 of the people hired to work for the city of Calgary were official registered lobbyists for Pembina. Anyways, I said that on Friday and I wrote it in the papers yesterday and people started to talk about it online. And Nenshi is known for wasting hours upon hours a day on Twitter. It's what the media love most about him, I think. He tweets. So he soon started arguing on Twitter with people who were saying my points were reasonable. You don't see that a lot in political leaders, do you? Getting into the muck, responding to any high school kid with a computer, duking it out with folks on Twitter. It's really fun for journalists to watch a politician like that, but it's rare for most politicians to do it. But Nenshi just can't help himself. So when a conservative pundit named Norman Spector said my analysis was worth listening to, Mayor Nenshi snapped back at me. He wrote, "No, let's keep in mind Ezra's anti-oil group has Preston on the board, is funded by and consults for oil companies. Typical lazy Ezra." So Nenshi had abandoned his earlier spin that Pembina were scientific researchers, but Preston Manning is on their board, so they must be okay, and I was too dumb and lazy to know it, unlike our Professor Mayor. Except that excuse doesn't really work either. Here's Pembina's board of directors. Preston Manning is not on the board of directors. Now, it is true he is part of a group of volunteers called their advisory council. But as you can see right here on the Pembina website, it clearly states Preston Manning does not endorse Pembina, and they do not endorse him. Now, I can start to see some snippiness creeping in from the mayor. See, I've known Nenshi for 25 years, since high school. Here's some footage of us in university when we were actually a debating team together for 2 years. Nenshi is charming and smart, but like most politicians and journalists, he's got an amazing arrogance to him too. Okay, no problem. He keeps it under control about 99% of the time. But every once in a while, when someone embarrasses Nenshi or doesn't buy into his particular spin or version of things, usually a version where he plays the hero, he snaps. 99% of the time he's in control, super friendly. But, and I've seen this over the past 25 years, every once in a while the mask drops and you see a viciousness in Nenshi that's just shocking and amazing at the same time. And here's what set off Nenshi yesterday. See, on Friday, Pembina's chief lobbyist named Ed Whittingham had told the Calgary Herald that his lobby group doesn't just send staff to work for the city of Calgary and bill them. They try to persuade the mayor of their environmentalist policies too. They bend his ear. Here's what Whittingham said, and I quote, Have we ever spoken to an alderman or the mayor about an issue and we've rubbed shoulders at an event? Yes, but have we sat down as a lobbyist? No, that's not what we do. Well, that actually is what you do, Ed, because meeting with politicians to convince them of something like getting rid of oil and gas is lobbying. And you know that too, Ed, because you and a bunch of others from your lobby group have registered with the Federal Lobbyist Registry as lobbyists. I mean, you can see right here, that's your name at the top, Ed, Chief Lobbyist. And you just told the Calgary Herald that you talk policy with Nenshi when you see him. That is the legal definition of lobbying, Ed. Except Nenshi has never reported those meetings or any other meetings with Pembina, ever. Now, Nenshi claims he's the most transparent, bestest mayor in the whole world. And he talks a good game, he always has. But I inspected every single meeting he's listed on his official mayor's website, and not once has he ever disclosed a meeting with Whittington or another Pembina staffer, though they say they've met with him. That's odd. So I asked the touchy professor about that on Twitter because that's how he spends his days. Here is my exact question to Nenshi. Pembina lobbyists say they talk policy with you at social gatherings. Will you disclose details of that lobbying? Because they won't. Fair question, I thought. But Nenshi was getting out of his comfort zone. I wasn't telling him how wonderful he was or how modern he was, to use Twitter, or how progressive he made Calgary look. I was asking about his lack of transparency. So the snippiness went up a notch. Here's what he said to me. He said, I've discussed policy with you too, Ezra. Oh my God, I must be a shill for the Sun. So he's trying to be funny, to make it no big deal that he didn't disclose his lobby meetings with Pembina. He was trying to make it like it was nothing, like everybody does it, including me. Except that that's not true, of course. I've never discussed city policy with Nenshi, and unlike Ed Whittingham, I am not a registered lobbyist paid to convince the mayor of something, and mayor's never paid me $340,000 as he has paid Pembina. So Mr. Transparency was becoming Mr. Fog, Mr. Try to Distract. So I just asked him again, and a bit firmer. I mean, given that he's campaigning for re-election, given that he gave such a strong endorsement of Pembina last week, what's the deal? Or as I put it to him, and you can see for yourself, will you disclose whether any Pembina staff are working on your election campaign or have donated to you? Is this a quid pro quo? I mean, a yes or no would do. I'm a journalist, he's a politician, he's the one who engaged me yesterday, which is sort of weird. Okay, fine, clear the air, what's the deal? And then we saw Nenshi's mask slip. We saw that second face of Naheed Nenshi, the rage, the how dare you challenge me, you mere citizen. Here's what he said, and I quote, when did you stop beating your wife? That's what he said. Can you believe that? When did you stop beating your wife? Beg your pardon? You're a politician who claims to be whistle clean, Mr. Transparency, who claims to take questions from the common people by Twitter, but who's on alibi number 3 already for why he paid $340,000 to anti-oil lobbyists, who's already calling me names, you know, lazy or whatever he called me. So you get another question and you don't like it, so you just snap and you go freaky weird and accuse me of a crime of spousal assault? Whoa.
Boy, that escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
It jumped up a notch.
It did, didn't it?
Yeah, I stabbed a man in the heart.
That's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. That's Nenshi. Most of the time, Nenshi's sweet as saccharine, but every once in a while, he's just raging, like blood vessels sticking out of his forehead and neck kind of rage. Whoa, buddy, a simple yes or no to my question would do. So much for Mr. Bring Back Civility to Politics, Mr. Inspire the Next Generation. Now, I pointed out to Nenshi that I have never hit my wife or any other person ever. Well, since I hit Lenny Berkovitz in grade 4, but he was a foot taller than me and he was wearing one of those puffy jackets and I don't even think he felt it. Who the hell accuses someone of beating their wife? I mean, isn't that the stereotypical, cliched, most offensive accusation pretending to be a question you could ask? Is that really the proper response to a journalist asking a valid question of a political leader in an election campaign? I mean, I was firm, to be sure, but I wasn't rude. But I had made the cardinal sin of challenging His Holiness, Naheed Nenshi. How dare I embarrass him by challenging his transparency or his ethics. Anyways, I answered his question. No, I hadn't ever hit anyone. Now, could he please answer my question? Yeah, no such luck. Now, like I say, this wasn't a personal conversation or even a small media scrum. This was Nenshi and I talking to each other in public over Twitter. And between us, we have about 150,000 Twitter followers, mainly his. Some people were just shocked that the mayor of a major city would act like such a jackass, get so nasty, be so thin-skinned. But I know him, so that didn't really surprise me. What did surprise me was his choice of slur, making a joke or a debating point or whatever he'd call it, out of domestic abuse. Because Nenshi likes to position himself as the most tolerant, most politically correct mayor in the country. But to someone he doesn't like, he'll make a false accusation of wife beating, which trivializes all real cases of spousal abuse, doesn't it? I mean, it's like crying wolf. And for what? Just to score some points against me? Because I was asking him a legitimate question? Imagine if Toronto's Rob Ford had made a joke about wife beating. Or imagine if any premier, you know, someone serious, a grown-up in this country, not an overgrown, spoiled child like Nenshi, had just plain old flipped out on a journalist like that. How embarrassing. Nenshi sort of knew he went too far, but 150,000 people witnessed it, so he decided to dig in. I asked him to retract and apologize, if not to me, then to my wife, but he was having none of it. Here's what he wrote back. He said, and of course there's nothing funny about domestic abuse, but pretending a reference to a loaded question is talking about excuse is actually immoral, unethical, and rabble-rousing, none of which Ezra Levant is, right? So you get that? He makes a joke or insult or whatever about spousal abuse, but can't bring himself to apologize or climb down. So he says, well, maybe it's not funny to joke about spousal abuse, but Ezra pretty much deserves it because he's immoral and unethical. Whoa, that escalated quick. Look, this man's unhinged. This is the mayor of Alberta's largest city. This is the man who has a $3 billion budget. This is a grown-up? I'm immoral for asking him about his lobbying ethics? Or was it that I objected to his insult to my wife? I'm not sure. But like I say, I've known Nenshi for 25 years. In that time, I have never, not once, not ever seen him apologize for anything or admit he was wrong ever. He's just genetically incapable of swallowing his pride. Listen, we all have that pride. I joke that I'd like to make an apology once a year, whether I need to or not. Nenshi just can't. Like a stubborn teenager, he's so proud, he just can't let someone else be right. It's about winning for him. That's why I call him two-faced, because he's built this carefully crafted public image of himself as a tolerant, caring, progressive listener. And it's true most of the time, unless you cross him. And then he's like the Incredible Hulk, just smashing however he can, insulting people, their wives, whatever. It's really weird, and it can be quite shocking. You can get a glimpse of that from his former students. He used to teach at Mount Royal College. When they could speak anonymously and not be punished by him, here are their ratings of him as a professor at Mount Royal College a few years ago. 18 of his students rated him online. Some loved him. But there's a theme amongst many of the reviews. Here, I'm going to list 9 of them. Yes, he definitely does make you feel like a little man. Mostly, we just learned about how highly he thinks of himself. This guy talks about himself only and doesn't teach a thing. Some students think he's cocky, but he just has a ton of experience. Arrogant teacher. Huge ego, it's hard to get a hold of him. Does not mark fairly, picks people in the class that he likes and basically talks to only them. Completely unprepared for each class, but always ready with an excuse. Be ready for his many, many other duties to take over his time and your class time. Once his ego fits through the door, he's ready and willing to make you feel about 2 inches tall. Boy, now those reviews go back as far as 2005, so it's not like they were his political opponents in the last few years when he was running for mayor. A couple of students now really liked him, it's true. One that was written a couple of weeks before the last election said he was wonderful and amazing, so there's that. Are you getting a picture here? Now online, it wasn't just Nenshi who attacked me. It was his young, low-information voter supporter fanboys who jumped into the fray too. It was amazing how many of them, especially young feminists, justified trivializing spousal abuse if it would make a good and witty political insult for their hero to use against me. They were just following the moral example of their leader. There were about 100 vile responses from Nenshi Nation. I'm just going to quote one of the most colorful. I'm going to spell out the swears. "You are such a disgusting piece of SHIT. Ezra Levant, you had such potential, but your SHITTY personality has PISSED it away. ASSHOLE. Sorry for all the spelling, but this is a family show. Hey, other than the choice of vocabulary, that tweet is basically the same message as Nenshi's to me, don't you think? But why? Why this reaction? Well, the reason's simple. Nenshi has never been grilled in his life. He won the last election as a surprise candidate. He's far left. But he won in Calgary because two right-wing candidates split the Conservative vote. Nenshi slipped up the middle. He was never really vetted, which is why Calgary has a mayor who loves the Pembina Institute and their anti-oil mission in an oil town. I mean, listen to him. Here he is praising Pembina at a fundraiser where they were raising money to attack the oil sands. Look.
Thank you for being there tonight, and thank you for supporting Pembina. Canada's most important, if you don't mind me saying so, clean energy think and do tank. Pembina does great work. And we are proud that Pembina was born and raised right here in Alberta because we take environmental sustainability seriously. We believe in long-term clean energy usage, and we believe in environmentally sustainable economic growth.
I remind you that clean energy usage for Pembina means no oil. Yeah, like I say, no vetting of the mayor. But there's another reason he's not used to scrutiny. Because he will not tolerate it. And I will give you a shocking example of that after the break. Don't move a muscle. Oh, let me tell you how Naheed Nenshi handles media dissent. Remember this guy, Artur Pawlowski? He has a Christian ministry for homeless folks in Calgary. Basically, he goes to the alleys, the underpasses, the parks, to where the homeless people are, and he feeds them food, and he gives them sleeping bags and preaches a little gospel. And he has been charged and prosecuted endlessly by Calgary city government. Close to 100 court appearances, seriously, for a pastor. Even as Nenshi allowed Occupy Calgary to camp out in a park illegally for more than a month, they kept arresting and charging Artur Pawlowski. Sorry, that's an anti-Christian double standard. That's called bigotry. They even arrested Pawlowski for singing Christmas carols in public in the big atrium of City Hall without a permit. I kid you not. You know, you'd think a mayor who himself is a religious minority would be more tolerant than that. So I said all of these things on the show a while back, and holy cow, did we get a massive volcanic eruption from Rage Boy Nenshi. He called up the Calgary Sun's publisher and demanded justice. And then he sent a spit-flecked legal demand letter, 2 pages long, just furious that a newspaper and a TV show would dare to criticize His Holiness and dare to accuse him of intolerance towards Artur Pawlowski. Well, you bet we did. And I'll do it again as long as it's true. Here, let me quote some of my favorite parts from Nenshi's letter. I'm just going to quote a few lines. "I am writing to you to express my extreme disappointment with respect to the publication of the article in the Toronto Sun, followed by an appearance on Sun News TV, where he called me a bigot, anti-Christian, and socialist, and gave out my email address on the air." Sorry, buddy, you are a socialist. You believe in big government. You hike taxes. Some of your biggest donors are City Hall public sector unions like the Transit Union. No wonder you give away the store to them in union contract negotiations. And I'm sorry, you are a bigot. City Hall's lawyer, under your direction, prosecutes that poor Christian pastor because he doesn't have a food preparation permit for giving food to the homeless or for singing Christmas carols. You would never do that to a Muslim group or to Occupy Calgary. And yeah, I gave out your email address. You're the mayor. I'm going to give it out again today, too. Now, I won't read all of Nenshi's letter. I'm just going to choose a few of my favorite words from Rage Boy. Extreme disappointment. Serious problems. I am shocked. This accusation is so offensive. It is impossible to ignore the racist undertones of this column. I have no problems with a columnist voicing his opinions. I have a very big problem. I am particularly disappointed. Offensive, disgusting, personally insulting. Oh, and this is my favorite. My life's work has been about bringing people from different communities together. I cannot stand by. I cannot hide my disappointment. A gratuitous and need to be said, again, untrue swipe at my personal life. Oh, yeah, I like that last part. From the guy who called me a wife beater. Say, do you think that Nenshi's a little bit thin-skinned? Maybe just a little bit? Do you think that if this is truly how he feels, that maybe going into public office isn't the right fit for him? Maybe being a professor where he gets to do all the talking, maybe that's a better place for him? But look, that's just the whining. That's the funny part of his letter. Here's the darker part, the real rage part. That first part was more whiny, complaining part. But here's the second part, the part that Nenshi probably doesn't want you to know about. See, yesterday during our online quarrel, I asked Nenshi several times, and his lawyer, Pembina Kendram, if they would consent to the release of this letter, or if I could, or how many other demand letters like it they've sent out to other reporters. No answer. I asked them 4 times. Nenshi kept talking to me online about other things, but he pretended not to see my 4 questions about this letter. And here's the dark part. He threatened me and the Sun if we ever dared to challenge him publicly again. Not just a threat of telling us how sad we made him, like that funny stuff I just read, but a legal threat. Again, I won't read the whole thing. He's almost as chatty as I am. It's a 2-page letter. But here are some excerpts from his letter. I cannot stand by and let QMI, that's Quebecor, the company that owns us, and let QMI defame my character without a response. I will require the following. QMI will fully retract the column and apologize for calling me a bigot. An unqualified apology. An acknowledgement that this is part of a pattern of behavior by Mr. Levant. A clear statement that opinion columnists are not, in fact, exempt from the requirement to write the truth. This retraction must be published in all QMI newspapers on the highest circulation day of the week. It must be further highlighted on all Sun newspaper and Sun News Network websites. The video clips of Mr. Levant's interview with Mr. Pavlovsky must be removed from all QMI online properties. QMI will publish an unedited response from me, Nenshi, if I choose to submit one. And then the or else moment in his letter, get this. Should QMI fail to retract the column and apologize, I will not hesitate to explore all of the options available to me. Now, given that he mentions lawyers and defamation earlier in the letter, I take that to mean he'll sue. Now, of course, we didn't give in to these demands because, how do I put this? I'm allowed to have a different opinion than he has. I'm allowed to call City Hall's war against Dr. Pavlovsky bigotry. I'm allowed to call high-tax Nenshi a socialist. I've put forward plenty of evidence to support my opinions, but at the end of the day, even if I'm the only person in the world with my opinions, it's still my right to have that opinion. My favorite part is that he demanded the right to publish a reply of any sort without the Sun being able to edit a single word of it. Hilarious, weird, strong and impressive in a Hugo Chavez sort of way of media relations. Yeah, no. We called Nenshi's bluff. And he never sued or even sent us a letter because, you see, it was all about intimidation. Calling out my boss on the phone, writing an over-the-top personal letter, 2 pages long, hand-signed, with all sorts of extreme demands. It wasn't serious. It was an attempt to make us blink. And we didn't. And Nenshi hates that. He always has. That's why he blew up at me yesterday. That's why he asked me if I beat my wife. My question was firm, but normal. He went nuts because I'm a journalist who hasn't drunk the Nenshi Kool-Aid. I think he's an awful mayor. He's raised taxes and given the money to his pals in the government unions. He loves a lobby group that wants to shut down the oil patch. Sure, he live tweeted the Calgary floods. Well, journalists like that, but that's not quite rising to the Rudy Giuliani level of crisis management. Sorry, being a Twitter pundit who publishes a lot of flood pictures isn't being a mayor. It's sort of what every high school kid does. Naheed Nenshi is charming most of the time, but not all the time. He tries to be, we all do, but he shows his true nature from time to time. He did that with me yesterday, and he did that with me last year with his legal demand letter. He doesn't want people to see his nasty side because it shows how fake his charming side is. And that's exactly why I'm going to put the full text of this demand letter up on my website if you want to check it out for yourself. I don't think Nenshi wants you to. Go to EzraLevant.com. It's a masterful letter, a weird combination in playing the victim, but also playing the bully, in whining, but also threatening. And the weirdest part of all is this. He's not some kid anymore. We're not college pals 20 years ago anymore. This isn't even some fellow pundit or activist or debater. He's supposed to be the mayor of one of Canada's most important, most serious cities. He wants to govern 1.1 million Calgarians. Hey, Naheed, how about starting by governing yourself? What do you think of Naheed Nenshi, of his wife-beating insult, of his threat letter to the Sun demanding that we stop making him so sad? Send me a note with your thoughts to thesource@sunmedia.ca. I'd love to read them. But send Nenshi an email too. He's at themayor@calgary.ca. Let him know what you think of his behavior, if it's fitting for a grown-up. But let me close with a teaser for tomorrow's show. I will acknowledge that my old debating partner, Naheed, has a point, or maybe half a point. What is Preston Manning doing with the Pembina Institute, even if it's just a minor volunteer role that specifically disowns Pembina's ideology? Why would a proud Albertan like Preston be part of a group whose mission is to end the use of oil? That's a small question. Preston is a private citizen. His time is his own. But tomorrow I'll ask a bigger question. The one thing Nenshi alluded to that genuinely troubles me. Why do some oil companies give money to anti-oil Pembina? Why does the allegedly conservative government of Alberta do so? Why does Stephen Harper, for crying out loud, do so? And why does a foreign embassy pay money to Pembina to pursue that foreign policy objective here in Canada? I'll have all that for you tomorrow. You won't believe which foreign embassy literally paid Pembina to specifically influence the government of the city of Calgary. But to find out, you'll have to watch tomorrow. Stick around.